It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you back to the second day of our Global Solutions dialogues with our young global changers and distinguished experts from around the world on different topics. The sessions that we're doing today are part of the 2021 Global Solutions Summer School. And for those of you who don't know yet, even though I mentioned it between every call, my name is Ole, and I'm the program lead of the Young Global Changers program and the director of this summer school. With this session, we are shedding light on the current moment, the moment in the midst of the pandemic, but we're also looking forward and talk about our world after the pandemic. And we have a number of experts here with us who will reflect on different areas and what this moment might mean. As with our previous sessions, you will be able to ask questions in the second half of the conversation. And in order to do that, please indicate via the Zoom chat that you actually have a question for the speaker. But now it is my honor and my greatest pleasure to welcome back actually to us and introduce my next guest, or our next guest rather, María Elena Agüero. María Elena is the Secretary General of the Club de Madrid, and over the course of her career, she gathered over 35 years of international experience on economic development, social cohesion, governance, institutional strengthening, democracy promotion, and more. And since 2016, she has held the role of the Secretary General of the Club de Madrid, which is a unique organization that brings together more than 100 democratic former heads of state and government. And María Elena, it's such a pleasure to see you and have you with us. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with all of you again. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ole.
Thank you. And the session will be moderated by Nicole Jordan Prudencio. She is a coordinator at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Bolivia. She is a political scientist with a master's degree in development studies from the University of Cambridge. She's also a university professor and, of course, a 2020 Young Global Changer who is very engaged on the topics of multilateralism and global governance. And I think this is some of the topics that we'll be talking about today with María Elena. And with that, Nicole and María Elena, I'm really looking forward to your conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Oli, for the kind introductory words, and thanks to the Global Solutions Initiative and YGC program for these expert dialogues. Hello, everyone, and dear María Elena, on behalf of the Young Global Changers, I just want to say that we are absolutely delighted to have you here with us today to participate in this dialogue about realigning multilateralism. So actually, first, I just want to get into context, and I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your organization. What is Club de Madrid? Who is part of it? What is it working towards now?
Okay, well, thank you very much. The honor and the pleasure is really all mine, and it's wonderful to be back. As Ole said, that the Club of Madrid is a very unique organization. It is celebrating this year its 20th anniversary. It was created in 2001 as a result of an urge, a need that was felt to support democratic transitions and consolidation. The moment was different in the sense that at that point in time, we all thought that democracy was on the rise, that it was a path that had already been set, and that what we were going to be working on was more transitions and greater consolidation. It's important to note that the meeting, or the founding conference, which took place in October of 2001, actually took place at another very important moment and turning point in history, even an inflection point, I'd say, which was after the attack to the Twin Towers. So it was a moment when we were all faced with the shock of terrorism, but by the same time, we were, as I said, hopeful and democracy enthusiasts at that point in time, and a number of democratic, at that point really sitting and former presidents came together with some of the world's greatest experts on the issue of democratic transitions and consolidation, met, and at the end of that meeting, when they looked at different aspects of democratic transition and consolidation, there was a decision to create an organization that would put at the service of today's, and that is an evolving today's leaders, both political, economic, from civil society, leadership in general, to put at the service of those that were working for greater, better democracy, democracy that delivers, which is our motto, and the emphasis being on delivery. And I'll get to that, back to that later, but to put at their service the experience, the convening power, and the access that democratic former leaders have. And at the start, there were about 22 sitting and former leaders in that conference, and therefore the founding members of the Club de Madrid. Today we have 116 that come from different parts of the world. We make a special effort to have geographic, gender, and political color balance. And they, of course, bring a wealth of experience, not only as in governance and in democratic governance and democratic leadership, but they weren't always presidents or prime ministers. So many of them come also with a lot of experience, specific experience in different areas, making this possibility of building bridges, getting proposals, ideas, and experience being sounding boards to current decision making, and to those that are thinking about positive change for our society. And it is the members that are the main protagonists of our organization. Wherever you see the Club of Madrid is doing this, that, or the other, or participating this, that, or the other, it is these former leaders who are still leaders. It is they who are engaging. We have a very small secretariat in Madrid that is the engine room, and we support the membership in their activities. Today, and I will stop with this, but today we're working on 3 different priority areas. That's part of our 20 to 2022 strategy, and that is next generation democracy, shared societies, and multilateralism and global cooperation. The synergies between them, I think, are evident to all of us who are in this call today, and the importance of this conversation and of the Global Solutions Initiative and of the Global Solutions Summit and our collaboration, because of the enormity of shared concerns and objectives, I think is also evident.
Thank you so much, María Elena. Actually, I love the motto, the democracy that delivers. I think that is wonderful. And I think that addresses some of the enormous weaknesses and challenges that we have been seeing are expressed in the multilateral system of how it is today. And I've also seen you have a series of papers that I think go in line with your annual dialogue of last year, where the phrase was multilateralism that delivers. And I would love to ask you in that sense, how has the pandemic affected multilateralism, and what can we make of the current rift around the question of, for example, global distribution of vaccines, which is the enormous challenge that we're facing nowadays?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's try to be, in as much as we can, positive and constructive. And yes, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged and has created enormous problems, but let's look at what it has allowed us to see more clearly. And in terms of multilateralism, I think that is essential. It has brought to the fore the weakness of the system with a vengeance. I mean, it has brought it to the fore to each and every one of us everywhere around the world. That in itself, being a crisis, is also a positive element, because we are all over the world aware at the same time of something that is happening. Even if we look at past crises, past conflicts. I am now sitting and talking to you from Uruguay for family reasons, but if we look at World War II, in South America, there were, of course, impacts, but it wasn't the same kind of impact or experience that was lived certainly in Europe. And that is one of our last huge shared crises, no? And we do look at, and many say that this is a moment very similar to the end of World War II, where we had to, shuffle the cards and give them out again. No? And so in that sense, it is important, I think, and very and valuable in as much as a crisis. There can be value in a crisis, but valuable in the sense that we are all facing this together. And I think that there's great awareness of this. In that sense, it is our task then to find the solutions together. And in doing so, it is not only a responsibility of the multilateral system, which has its weaknesses, and it's in spite of everything that it has accomplished, and we do have to recognize that as well. It has its weaknesses, but we also have to keep in mind that the multilateral system can only give what the nations that are part of it can give. And going down that same line or along that same path, a nation can only give what its citizens can give. And so when we speak about delivery, and delivery is the focus, both in terms of democracy and in terms of multilateralism, we have to think of all of it, of the whole of it, and realize that we are all part of that solution. And we have to be, therefore, we have to listen to each other. We have to find the solutions together. We have to draw on the experience. And today we have to be particularly innovative, because part of the challenge of this crisis, the good of it and the challenging of it, is also our interconnectivity. And interconnectivity today has a tremendous amount of foundation, let's say, of basis in innovation, in creation, and strengthen that. So I think that this is something that, again, all of us have to work on and add together. Easier said than done, yes, but that's why we have to get to the task.
Thank you, María Elena. And you're mentioning excellent points. We have to be particularly innovative. I think that's accurate. And I think that is why it's so important for young global changers to be present here today and to be present in this effort of reimagining multilateralism. I wanted to ask you, because the pandemic has intensified in some sort of ways the structural problems already present in the multilateral system, particularly the part of delivery that you were putting the emphasis on. What do you think must be the next steps to get to a strong, inclusive, and rules-based multilateral system?
Well, first of all, I think we have to look at the structures and at the institutions, and start off recognizing how some of them, even though they are connected. And if we think, for example, of the UN system as one, which is one of the main efforts that we saw in the past decade. If we look at the UN system, at times we find that there are elements that it's not a question of contradicting each other, but there's a lack of clarity, and where the competence or the ability of one agency or one area of the system to work in a particular field, where that ends and the other one begins. For example, one of the ideas that some of the members of the Club of Madrid have been putting forward is the fact that, yes, we have to look at security UN Security Council reform. We have to look at it. We have to look at reform of the UN system. But we also have to find ways, and here's where the element of innovation also comes in. We have to find ways of making the General Assembly perhaps be able to take on more responsibility and decision-making powers, finding that complementarity and strengthening it between where does the role of the Security Council start and end, where does the role of the General Assembly start and end, and thinking more broadly of that is something that some of our members have put on the table. Also, the importance of in this constellation of that makes up the multilateral system, because there are many different bodies in it. Some are closer together and united, but others are more independent. So if we look at the regional development banks, for example, nothing speaks clearer to any policy than a budget. Well, the regional development banks have a very definite role to play in situations like the crisis, in other situations where we find, certainly when we had the economic crisis in 2008, 2009, but also importantly and key is the relationship between the international or the multilateral system, governmental, intergovernmental, and the non-governmental. That the voice of civil society, how that can be strengthened and how that can be brought in. And I'd like to emphasize the fact that it's not that the international institutions and the multilateral institutions aren't aware of the importance and the value of civil society. Efforts have been made over the past years. I had the privilege to work, I'm talking about several decades back, but I had the privilege to work in the mid-'80s, with what was then the World Bank NGO Committee. The concept of NGO, and we've got to realize this, the concept of non-governmental organization really gelled and took shape in the 80s, in the very early 80s. And already in 85, there was this, 85, 86, there was this movement on the part of the World Bank. I speak about that which I know and I lived. So on the part of the World Bank to set up a dialogue, to establish a dialogue with non-governmental organizations. Since then, this has fortunately grown, expanded, spread, and there are many different non-governmental organizations that are engaged in these dialogues, and channels of and ways of getting the voice of citizens activism, also organized, is an established reality today, and building the best bridges, building the best ways of getting those voices from the citizens to decision makers is what we as Club of Madrid aim to do. Again, using the voice and agency of our members and those that they are able to convene. But to do that, we also depend on the non-governmental. It's a work that has to be collaborative.
Thank you, María Elena. You're making an excellent point in the idea of like how can we make these bridges, right? Because I think there is a consensus on the idea that we have to bring the voice of civil society and integrate it more, so we do not leave anyone behind. But the thing is how we can do this, and I think that what you're proposing in terms of the alliances that are needed in order to make this work is absolutely necessary. I'm actually, in that sense, I also wanted to ask you, you were talking about how we can find complementarity between the different institutions to make more efficient deliveries, if you want. How can a reformed multilateral system ensure this effective accountability structures at all levels of governance? Because we have been seeing that even though multilateral system has to remain based on this idea of thinking globally because we're facing global problems, we also need this accountability structures at a local level, right? So we need to perform in the sense of acting locally and thinking globally. How do you see this accountability structures could be strengthened or make sure that they are effectively delivering what we need?
Again, I think that a lot of work has been done there, but a lot of innovation has to be introduced and creativity, in the sense that we've got to find ways, and the pandemic has allowed us again to find different ways, because we are now communicating much more frequently, let's say, and easily. We have learned to use these instruments, and this is facilitating. It's also complicating sometimes, but it is facilitating the messaging and the delivery of those messages. Now, if we look at the how, the only way is to make sure that we find mechanisms that will allow the voices of the local to be heard. The voices have to be heard, and the voices also, and this is my very personal opinion, we have to find ways of making those voices heard in a constructive way. Activism cannot be seen always as being aggressive. We have to find, and sometimes it has to be, but we have to find ways of making that activism be and aim to be as constructive as possible. And being constructive means let's build upon what has been achieved. And that means knowing very well what has been achieved so that it can be strengthened, it can be recuperated, and certainly not forgotten along the way. I think that one of the challenges of all of this today is the speed with which things happen, the speed with which ideas are put forward, and how the speed with which sometimes they fall through the cracks. So it's important to find ways of strengthening the messages, but making sure, and that's part of the accountability, making sure that they do reach those entities that have a decision-making power, and that influence try to be as constructive as possible. And the multiplicity, I see that one of the questions from Nino is about EU multilateralism and incorporating the policy, in how that incorporates the policy for non-EU country multilateralism. I think that if we look at the dialogues that the EU tries to have with different regions and with different bodies, that is already there, a mechanism. But if we look at the multiplicity of those dialogues, not only for the EU but for the others, it is daunting. And so that is why it is important to try to be as focused and as direct as possible. Let me highlight something that we're doing, if I may, and plug it into the conversation. And that is, as you know, for us, delivery is the focus. Delivery in terms of democratic governance, delivery in terms of democratic multilateral governance. And so, in that sense, and because of the in this context of the pandemic, we have established a global commission on democracy and emergencies. And this is an example. We've put together a commission of members of the Club de Madrid and other individuals who have experience from different walks of life and from different organizations, be it intergovernmental, be it within national, even at the intergovernmental level, in terms of interparliamentary, in terms of civil society organizations, humanitarian organizations, etc. A dialogue and a commission to try to find ways in which emergencies, drawing on the COVID-19 experience, but emergencies, natural resource emergencies, also national disasters, what lessons can we draw from them to make democracies more resilient, to make democracies more responsive, to make democracies better deliver. And in this bottom-up process, if the democracies and if nations deliver better or find problems that or obstacles to their delivery, how this is transmitted and then handled and addressed by the multilateral institutions will also offer a framework that will trickle down. I mean, it's a two-way dialogue. It's a two-way path.
Thank you very much, María Elena. It's actually very complex, but you have given us so much light into where we can begin, like what are the steps forward. Now I would like to open the discussion to the audience. So please feel free to put your questions or to raise your hand so I can call you and you can pose your question to María Elena. We have Navam Niles with a question. Navam, if you can turn on your mic.
I've seen it, I see it, I see them. So if I'll just jump into them if that's okay with you. This one is about the rise of illiberalism or the rise of authoritarianism in countries. I think that this is one of the most interesting challenges, and it comes back to what I was saying earlier as to the founding of the Club of Madrid. In 2001, we were ecstatic about the fact that Poland and Hungary and the other countries after the fall of the Iron Wall, let's say, the way that they were moving into democratic governance and into democratic systems. And we thought that this was going to continue and be strengthened. And we see that the risk is everywhere. Again, this is something that is important and something that unfortunately we are sharing. The challenge to democracy, which is a living organism. I mean, democracy is something we have to work at every day. It doesn't happen and stay. It has growing pains, but it has living pains or life pains as well. And that is this is some of what we are addressing, of what we are working and discussing, and bringing the views of the members to the European Union, but also to others. As you can imagine, we have well, right now we have a couple of members that are from Poland. None from Hungary at present, but we have a lot of members who come from Central and Eastern Europe and transitional democracies in that sense. But just to flag something, this isn't just happening in Poland or Hungary, it's happening in established democracies, mature democracies like the US, where we thought it has been the beacon of democracy for so long, and we see those tensions there as well. And so it's something that, yes, we are looking at, and we are facilitating dialogue in as much as we can, and bringing again the views and the experience of our members to this discussion. In fact, our annual policy dialogue this year, it is our flagship activity, and it will be on rethinking democracy, and it will be taking place in the US. October 26 to 28, allow me to plug it in. We hope to be able to engage the Global Solutions Initiative and the youth cohort of the Global Solution Initiative as much as we can in this discussion. And it will be addressing precisely this, Navam, among other things.
Thank you so much, María Elena. Maybe Navan, you have like a brief comment on that. You would like to add something.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you, Elena, for that wonderful discussion. I mean, you answered my question quite well. I mean, I understand it's a very complex problem, and it's going to take a lot of time. I just, if you have the time, if no one else has a question, I'd also curious to know what you think about, the fact that the European Union wasn't designed to manage this kind of authoritarian regimes. I mean, at least from where I'm sitting, if you want concrete action, you need consensus, and the problem is you have these regimes with essentially veto power over reforms that could push them in that direction. Given that the European Union wasn't designed for this, do you think that there's actual hope for, bringing them back into the fold? Does that have to be from the bottom, from grassroots initiatives, or do we need fundamental reform, maybe another treaty amendment? If you have the time, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you so much. And thanks, Nicole, for that opportunity to follow up. Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure my thoughts will be helpful because they're very much along the same line as yours. I mean, and it's not that yours aren't helpful. It's just that these are the doubts and the challenges that we're all facing. And we've had, for example, and it was a very rich discussion along these lines of building bridges and exchanging ideas. We are having a series of discussions with various European Commission vice presidents and commissioners, people that are working precisely on this. Also with partners in Europe, in the European NGO world, to see how we can address these issues and support a process that I think, Navam, that I think the European Commission and the European institutions are very, very conscious of, and to which challenges to which they are looking for solutions. And working on intensely, I would say, at this point. It is also looking at, well, what are the different elements, let's say, that have to be part of the solution. For example, tech. What role is information and the information ecosystems? What role is that playing in either involuntarily, from our perspective, strengthening in liberalism, and how can tech be used to reverse that? How can we? I think that it's what we have found is that these are challenges that the Commission and the different departments and units are very conscious of and working on. As you know, there are the various strategies that are being put forth by the Commission. It's interesting that, I mean, it was a new Commission when the pandemic started, so they have had to manage this challenge as well. But there are a number of not only initiatives at this stage, but directives, ideas, policy proposals that are already out there for the European Parliament to decide on in some cases, out there for the Commission, within the Commission to decide on, and certainly for on the discussion table for any exchanges. I don't know, Nino, if that's another question that you have and your hand from before.
Yes,
Okay.
that's another question, right? Hello from Georgia. Like, thank you for a wonderful answer on my previous question, and I hope you can hear me well.
Very well.
So, right, my second question would be, like you have mentioned, to increase the level of civil activism. That would be one of the new strategies or new directions which multilateralism is going to focus on. So are there any concrete strategies of how this should happen? Because we are citizens, like from my region, let's say, we are emerging democracy. And of course, civil activism is very important, but at some point we hear that in the post-war societies, the voices of civilians are not entirely heard outside of our nation state. So is there any concrete strategy that we could include ourselves or civil society of my country into the dialogue of multilateralism?
Well, number one, I think the strategy you've just used, which is making known that feeling, that sense, is very important. Not only because I will transmit it, but because others will be listening to this. And so you are already making your voice heard in that sense. In this, however limited it might be, is sphere or context, but there are a number of international organizations that I'm sure you're aware of, I mean, that bring together civic activism and those that are engaged with it. For example, as we prepare for our policy dialogue and our discussion on rethinking democracy, we have been in contact, and they are partners, but they will be helping us craft, shape, and carry out our policy dialogue and the work leading up to it and beyond it. Organizations like Civicus or the World Movement for Democracy and other kinds of alliances within Europe and elsewhere. I think that strengthening and again, harping is perhaps too harsh a word, but insisting, which is probably a more diplomatic one, insisting on the issues at every level is important, and seizing the opportunities, seizing and seeking them and seizing them, I think is vital at the level of civic activism. And there again, taking advantage of a tool that the pandemic has made all the more evident in terms of its usefulness, and it is the fact that we can communicate more readily.
Thank you, dear María Elena. I don't know if we have any other question. I think we have time for one more question. If not, then
I would like to ask a question, if I may, of all of you, and whoever wants to respond. But what do you feel is the most important, maybe flaw, but by the same time the most important contribution that we can all make in terms of the multilateral delivery from each of our individual homes and positions? What do you feel, and what have, in your discussions, what has come up as the 1, 2, or 3 elements that you feel are most important to focus on?
Thank you, María. I love the exchange of roles here, and I think it's so pertinent to include young people. So I invite you all, I don't know who wants to start addressing this. Don't be shy. Okay, so we have Nino again. So Nino, please.
Right. Well, interesting question, because I'm sorry to say it, but we are not EU members. So first of all, it would be like more inclusion from the regions which have no representatives in the European Union. Unfortunately, like from my perspective, and I am actually teaching international relations, so from my perspective and from what we see nearly for 2 decades now, our representatives try on every level to reach up to European Union, to global leaders, to the representatives of the global leaders, but only through the young generation it became possible to reach out. Because unfortunately, it happens often that the members of particular organizations still achieve higher level of cooperation on their level, rather than they try to expand their borders and leave the comfort zone. So for me, it would be like more inclusion of those voices, Global South, for example, not only, let's say, not only Caucasus as a region, but Global South as a region, South America as a region, right? So more inclusion in the debates of multilateralism, because we understand that there are democracies, there is like, let's say, share the values that the democracies have and that rising liberalism has, but also there are emerging states, and we should not forget about them because we are not that bad. So, right, more inclusion, right? First of all, that would be most challenging aspect for us in from my perspective in our country, because I teach very vast number of young generation, and they very often feel not heard enough. So that would be amazing if EU and any sort of commission would let's say pay more attention to them, because there are particular regions that still struggle today with that. So that would be, let's say, one challenge that I could name.
Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody else has an answer. Maybe while you figure out, I was actually part of a working group within the Young Global Changers, and we were trying to figure out what we could propose in order to address the inclusion of youth in these processes and help reimagining this. And we were thinking that there is not enough representation of young people along all stages of governance, even within states. And that, of course, does not reflect at multilateral institutions. And now we have been hearing more and more voices, more activists raising their voices actually to tackle such huge problems. For example, Greta Thunberg, that have inspired us all, right? And we think that it would be interesting to propose some sort of a youth alliance for multilateralism that could be composed of a diverse network of young change makers representing global youth at different multilateral institutions who could in some sort of way contribute in this sense of innovative and creative processes that you, María Elena, were even mentioning. I don't know if we have some other question or other proposal, but I think that young people should be represented and should be able to share their ideas on how we could tackle on these like particular issues. So I think that could be my proposal on behalf of these amazing group of people, which is actually, I don't think all of them are present here, but Hattie is here with us, and then Niels and Johanna. So
yeah, let me just share some ideas on both what Nino said and what you're just saying, Nicole, in the sense of referring to what Nino was mentioning regarding inclusion and inclusion of other regions. It's very, very important, I think, to in terms of what you're saying and your inclusion in a subset of Europe. You are Europe, but it's another subset of Europe, and which is the Union, and the idea of using, and sometimes that's not the best word, but maybe deploying, using a combination of both, the advantages of the multilateral to strengthen the national and the local, and what is needed at the national and at the local. And so that if there are directives at a higher multilateral level, directives that can be a hook, so that the claims made at the national and local level can be backed up in a more and supportive in a stronger way. I think that is the essence, or not the essence, but one of the beauties and the important elements that multilateralism brings. It's that in a way that coverage, no, and that is important to highlight and to claim and to strengthen. And it's in terms of how those voices can be better heard. I think that it's building those bridges and finding those institutions and finding those instances. When you're referring, you know, to the fact that you are teaching and you're teaching international relations, it is training, the capacity building is essential, but it has to be capacity building that empowers, and capacity building that empowers in the sense of stimulating the feeling that, and I don't want to paraphrase President Obama, but the feeling that yes, we can, in this, but I do want to paraphrase President Obama, but in that sense, and finding the ways of being able to do it, and the instances, and taking advantage of each of them. And Nicole, because I know we're running out of time, but what you're saying is also important, and something that we've been looking at. And for example, it was interesting to learn, and because you come from South America, it was interesting to learn for me that the African Union has a youth envoy. I don't think the Latin American organizations have one. At least I haven't found one. But you know, doing going to the different levels. The youth envoy at the UN has been there for a number of years. The UN envoy at the African Union, and it is not only the alliances outside, but being present within, because I think that one can be an activist from outside, but it's very important to be an activist from within. And working in the system as much as we can. And I think, Nicole, that in a way that is what you're getting at in what you're saying. How can we make sure? And we can make sure by number one, speaking about it, but going to the decision makers as much as we can, building those bridges so that these systems then incorporate these kinds of figures within them, in their womb.
Thank you so much, María Elena. I think we could keep going with many questions because of your amazing experience, but sadly we have no time left. We have to close up the meeting. So I really appreciate all your inputs. And I think we are all so pleased to know exactly what you're doing in Club de Madrid. How are the steps that we have to move forward in order for joint deliberation processes to advance towards a bottom-up approach to global governance, which is needed. So in that sense, I just want to say that we still are facing COVID-19 is a disruption which represents a historic inflection point for humanity. And it has, of course, revealed many key vulnerabilities, but I think that it has also carried a powerful message, which is that global problems require global responses. And that's it, right? So we have to be creative and think about which type of global responses we can enact. With that, I just want to thank you again and give the word to Oli to close the event. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Oli, for stepping in, but thank you very much. It's been an honor for me. Our doors are open, our screens are open, our phones are open. Reach out to us when you look at what we're doing, and reach out to us if something is of your particular interest, and we'll try to be as responsive as possible.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, María, Elena, for taking the time and being with us. That was a fascinating discussion, and I look forward to more collaboration with the Club de Madrid along the avenues that you already mentioned. I think this is a very fruitful and important collaboration, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this. And I want to thank everyone else here in the call for their input and for their time.